Joining me now, Republican presidential candidate and former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson. Governor, thanks so much for joining us. We have a lot to discuss today, but first, you say the Durham report, which was just released, highlights your call to, quote, reform the FBI. What changes would you want to see, and why do you think Durham himself didn't make specific new recommendations for reform?
Well, the Durham report was very important because it laid the foundation and need for reform. I don't think they specified it because that wasn't his mandate. He was reviewing it, the conduct for criminal purposes, and so the recommendations, though, even though they're not there, it's clear that the FBI is in need of oversight, it's in need of more accountability and more focus. It's a great institution. I've worked with them as a United States attorney, as head of the DEA, always in federal law enforcement, but they have such a broad jurisdiction that it needs to be more narrow. And that's what has to be looked at, and I hope to lay out more specific plans, but 3 weeks ago I announced, when I announced for president, I said we've got to reform the FBI, bring it more accountable, not defund them, but to support them and to make them more responsive to their primary mission, which is counterterrorism. And so let's have that kind of reform, but it can be broader to the federal agencies that right now we have so many, and they overlap in jurisdiction, they get in conflict with each other and not as effective. This is the reform that I want to bring.
I don't know if you know this, but former President Trump just reacted to the Durham report, saying, and I'm quoting him now, the American public was scammed, his words. Are you concerned this will fuel Republicans like Trump and his allies who continue to attack the FBI big time?
Well, it will, and what's important is that we do not diminish our institution of justice. We do not diminish the rule of law in our country. And those that work in law enforcement, we want to support. We recognize the important role that they have. And that's what separates our country as a democracy, is that we're founded on that rule of law. And so Donald Trump regretfully mixes his personal concerns with the denigrating of the rule of law, which hurts our institution. And so that's where we can talk about reform and responsible policy for our law enforcement without trying to get personal about it or undermine what is so critical to our country.
I want to turn, Governor, while I have you, to the 2024 presidential contest. Governor DeSantis, as you know, says the GOP has developed a culture of losing, his words. Does DeSantis need to state unequivocally that Trump lost the 2020 presidential election?
Well, I'll let him decide about that. Obviously, I've said that the 2020 election, we lost the race for the presidency then. Donald Trump lost. We lost again in 2022. And so, sure, we need to get winning. That's not a unique statement that Ron DeSantis is making. What, though, is important that states like Arkansas, we did gain seats. We had a good red year. Iowa did, as the governor pointed out. But let's talk about the future, and whether you're on Joe Biden's side or whether you're on Donald Trump's side, let's stop talking about the past. Let's focus on the future and important policies to get our economy back on track, to get our rule of law strengthened, to stop crime in the cities, and to strengthen our border security. These are things that are important, and I'm looking forward to being back to Iowa and talking about all of those issues that impact our future.
Yeah, that's so important. The future, these issues are really important. One specific issue, Trump just weighed in on Governor DeSantis' abortion ban in a new interview, saying, and I'm quoting him now, many people felt it was too harsh, but dodging on whether Trump himself would sign a 6-week ban. How do you interpret that?
Well, I think every candidate needs to be clear on their position on this issue. It matters to people. It matters to our unborn children and to women and to everybody in this country. And so whenever you look at the issue, I think it will ultimately be resolved by the states. State by state will develop their policy. Some of them will be more strict, others will not be. There'll be a debate about the national policy, but I'm doubtful that we'll get there because it would take a supermajority. I've said if you brought a law to me that had the right exceptions in place and reasonable limitations, then I would sign that. I think people just have to be clear as to what their view is on this and let the public decide. It will be an issue, but there'll be many issues beyond abortion that will determine the 2024 election.
Governor Asa Hutchinson, thanks so much for joining us. Let's certainly continue this conversation down the road.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Wolf.